Okay, while we wait for the others, no, I just want to share some thoughts about the comments on the chat box. The big idea here is that critical thinking is not just important for classrooms and when you're doing research. No, it really affects our moral life. No, and it's quite alarming that that thinking is not in fashion today. People just want to use sound bites. People just want to come up with slogans, no, that are viral. Um, so it's important for us to engage in critical thinking. Some people were say somebody said, what happens when I engage in critical thinking and we all end up fighting? I'm talking about critical thinking and making a judgment. You don't have to discuss it with other people. If they're not ready, there's no point. No. Um, Leon Alampay has an interesting question. Is critical thinking like or akin to discernment? Yes, no? Because both discernment and critical thinking are about what scholars call ill-structured problems. Ill-structured problems are problems with no self-evident answer. No? Hindi yung mga objective questions, di ba? And when you do that, when you're discerning, you're not sure what the right answer is, so you have to weigh. No, you have to engage in judgment. No, the same with critical thinking. It's not obviously we're not talking about does gravity exist? That's obvious, no? Or is the world round? Although that's not so obvious to some people, no? But we're talking about the more important questions in life, which are more complex, and the answers are not as self-evident. Okay. Okay. So please keep the chat box going. I think it's good to just express what you're thinking, because even if it doesn't get an answer, by articulating your thoughts or questions, you're also clarifying your thoughts. No, and it's okay if you're not very clear yet, but it's important, I think, just to ask questions, because I don't have all the answers anyway. No? I don't have the answers as well. So I'm just sort of provoking you into thinking about the world and thinking about our faith. And we're talking about evil today, and for me, it's an eye opener, no, to hear what Hannah Arendt said. If you want to look for great evil, she says, don't look for the devil. No? Look for ordinary people, mediocre people like Eichmann, who just don't want to think. No? And because those people, us, if we don't think, are capable of great evil. No? Ordinary, mundane people who don't want to think, who are not capable of deep thinking, we're the ones who are capable of great evil. That's a very scary thought that some of you said in the chat box. Okay, good. Let's now go let's go back to the Lord, how he deals with. Now we want to train our eyes on the Lord. How does he deal with evil? We want to learn from him, no? Because we don't even have to mention names, right? I think some of you were mentioning names already, no? It's funny how some names can already sort of capture what I was talking about, no? So anyway, I would like to encourage, especially the men. I know there are fewer of you in the audience to volunteer to read, so that we'll have other voices. No, okay. So I'd like to invite you to unmute yourself and then to read the passage. The passage is about the trial of our Lord. So let's focus our attention on our Lord, how he acts, and the kind of surrounding that he finds himself in, and how he must be thinking and feeling. Okay. So I'll begin. And they led Jesus to the high priest. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And they led Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes were assembled. And Peter had followed them at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards and warming himself at the fire.
Thank you.
Now the chief priests and the whole council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, and their witness did not agree.
Thank you.
And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands. Yet not even so did their testimony agree.
And the high priest stood up and asked Jesus, have you no answer to make?
What is it that these men testify against you? But he was silent and made no answer.
Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven."
And the high priest tore his garments and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?"
And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him. Saying to him, the guards struck him with blows.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the reading. So I hope somehow you have made an effort to imagine what the Lord must have been thinking and feeling all throughout this trial, no? When he was being accused falsely and the accusations were not, agreeing with one another. No? When he was being, also when he was being, hurt, he was being spat at, his face was being covered, he was being struck, and they were mocking him to prophesy and so on and so forth. And also when he was asked that question, no? When he was asked that question about whether he was the Son of God, no? He chose to remain silent most of the time, but he answered when he was asked that question. If you had to think of one word to describe our Lord during this, how he acted towards his enemies as he was surrounded by them, what would it be? What do you think would be the word that you would think of? Again, please type in the chat box. Obviously, I'm trying to keep you awake, right? By keeping, that's my secret in my classes. I always get them to do something. Calm, detached, meek, compassionate, truthful, gracious, calm, confident, humble. Okay. To be honest with you, the words don't tell us, no? Because it really depends on how we read it. If our readers had used a different tone, then that's probably how you think our Lord felt, I think. No? But whether our Lord was silent, even if he stayed calm, remember when he said thy will be done, he was fully committed already. There was no turning back, there was no looking back. But I think one word that I would say, when he refused to answer questions, and he answered the one question that mattered, even if he knew it was going to lead to his death. One word I think that struck me, and all the other words can apply also, is defiant. He was defiant. He didn't mock his enemies. He didn't provoke them, but he was defiant. He stood his ground. He didn't answer stupid questions because he knew they were not going to believe him anyway. When he was asked the one dangerous question that he knew would lead to his death, he spoke the truth. He was able to speak truth to power, which, as we know, is so difficult to do, especially in particular eras, right? Simone Weil, a philosopher, another female philosopher, said, never react to an evil in such a way as to augment it, as to add to it. And I think that's what our Lord did. He was responding to evil. He was dealing with it, but he wasn't adding to it. He wasn't provoking them and mocking them. But he stood his ground. He did not augment evil, but he also did not become one of them. He did not go down to their level. He was defiant, but he was also dignified. Not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. Also, I think here we see something about our Lord that we hardly talk about in Good Friday. In Good Friday, we usually think of him as the suffering servant, right? He was suffering, and that's true. He was crucified, that's true, no? But why was he crucified? Why did he allow himself to be crucified? The reason was he was fighting a battle. He was resisting evil. He was fighting evil. That's the reason why he allowed himself to be crucified. That's why he's going through this difficult thing. He was being a warrior. But his warfare was nonviolent, because he wanted to make sure that by even when he's resisting evil, he does not become one of them, and he does not add to the evil. Now, this is a very difficult art. How can you fight evil without adding to it? Most of us, the moment we want to fight other people, even if they're not evil, we end up escalating the violence, no, in language or in action. Diba? Parang that's what we do. We try to outdo one another, no, and defeat one another. No? Um, and we become very violent in words, if not in our action. No? But nonviolent resistance against evil, that's a very difficult art. No? It's very tricky. Of course, in the Philippines, in our history, we have EDSA, no? One event where that sort of illustrated nonviolent resistance, no? But remember, it was an open system. There were a lot of other factors that came into play. Certainly the crowds were one of them, very important reason. But there were also a lot of other causes that were interacting with one another that led to the event. No, it could have led to somewhere else. No, something else. No? Um, Let me ask you this question. All throughout that event, what emotion do you think Jesus felt during the trial? There are many emotions, but let's focus on the four basic ones. No? The four basic ones are joy, sadness, fear, and anger. Psychologists say all our emotions are a mix of any of them. No? Anyway, so just choose one of them. Which one do you think was the emotion that Jesus must have felt? Again, we don't know. We weren't there. But I think we can rule out joy, right? I think you will agree with me to rule out joy. But sadness, fear, or anger, they're the unpleasant emotions. No? And they're the emotions we feel when we are in an unpleasant situation. No? And certainly the trial was. Um, which one would you choose? Let me take a look. Sadness, fear. Okay. I'm not seeing anger. I only saw it once or twice. It's interesting. But I'd like to propose to you that, yes, of course, Jesus was sad. Of course, he was worried and afraid. I'd like to propose to you, is it possible that he was angry? Is it possible that he was angry? Remember, our Lord is capable of anger. He threw a fit in the cleansing of the temple. No? He drove out people with a whip in his hand. He did not say, excuse me, guys, I hope you don't mind, but you have to leave the temple. He didn't say that, no? He overturned tables and drove them away. He was angry, no? So our Lord is capable of anger. Is it possible that he felt anger? I would think so if we use our imagination. If I were there, it's possible to have a mix of emotions, including anger, no? And when we're angry at evil, when we're angry at when we have anger against evil, that's called righteous anger or righteous rage. No? And righteous anger and righteous rage should be felt. It should be experienced because that's where the energy for the battle comes from. No? If you don't feel righteous anger or righteous rage, you will not have the energy to fight the battle. If you're battling evil, you need anger. No? You have to hate evil, but it should be channeled into defying and resisting evil in a productive way. The question is how. No? In the case of the trial of our Lord, the way he did it was he ignored the questions and stood his ground, but he answered the one question that he knew would lead to trouble, but he answered it anyway. No? We have to discern, no, whenever we find ourselves in a similar situation. First of all, is our anger righteous? Is it anger at evil, or is it only anger because of our own needs, because we feel threatened or we were insulted? No? So we have to be discerning. We have to ask ourselves, the thoughts racing in our heads, which one should we listen to? No? Which ones are accurate? No? And then, if it's righteous anger, how can I channel this into defying and resisting evil productively? No? Not by adding to the violence, no? Not by becoming one of them. And that calls for a lot of discernment as well. And I think we find ourselves in many situations, individually and collectively, when such discernments are called for. No? Is it time for righteous anger? Is it time for righteous rage? And if so, how do you channel it to defy and resist evil without becoming evil yourself and without adding to the evil? But there's more. there's more. If we look at the story of Good Friday, we were talking about Holy Thursday a while ago, the trial. If we go into Good Friday, we see more. So I'd like to do a contemplative reading of the last moments of Jesus, and I'd like to invite again volunteers, both men and women, to read the passage. Again, it's a very familiar story. It's the last moments of our Lord. To read it slowly and prayerfully so that we can enter into the silences of the passage. So I will begin with the first slide. And when they came to the place which is called the skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
And they cast lots to divide his garments, and the people stood by watching. But the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, the chosen one.
Okay, next one, please.
The
soldiers
also
also mocked him,
coming up and offering him vinegar, and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, This is the King of the Jews.
One of the criminals who were hanged
him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong.
And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
And he said to him, Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.
It
was
now
about the sixth hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the ninth hour, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last.
Okay, thank you again to all the volunteers, including those who actually did a duet. No, that's all right. So this is a reading that you will really encounter frequently today, because this is the central event for Good Friday, the death of our Lord. But the few moments before that, I think it's pretty clear what is most remarkable about our Lord. That he, in his moment of pain, he extended forgiveness and compassion. First of all, he extended compassion to the thief, the good thief, because the good thief was actually coming to his defense. But what's astounding here is that he forgave even his enemies, the people who were actually mocking him and making him suffer. So we have to talk about forgiveness, because this is part of what our Lord did in dealing with evil. Forgiving is very hard, especially when you have these three things going on. I'd like to talk about them one at a time. First, when the hurt is deep. When you've been hurt very deeply, and maybe again and again, and the wound is really deep, it's hard to forgive. It takes an extraordinary amount of grace and blessing from God to be able to forgive. Either that, or you're doing what Richard Rohr calls spiritual bypassing. You're spiritualizing, you're repressing your hurt, and you're pretending it's okay. Parang ganon. And that's not a good way to forgive. Because at the end of the day, eventually the hurt will come out again, and you will be even more resentful. That's why it's important to always be contextualizing ourselves in what's going on in our life. So the first occasion when forgiving is hard is when the hurt is deep. And some of us may have experienced this. And the people who've been responsible for the hurt are very difficult to forgive. Or it has taken a long, long time before we've forgiven them. Some of us may not even be there yet. And that's completely understandable because we've been hurt very deeply. No? Second occasion, when it hasn't stopped, when it's still continuing. No? I think it's impossible, no, to forgive someone if that person is still hurting you. No? And so it's just important to note that. No? And finally, even if time has already passed, no, many years or decades have passed already, no, the wound has already healed. The scar has even disappeared, maybe. No? So the hurting has stopped, no, for years, but there is no remorse. The person doesn't care, doesn't show any guilt, doesn't show any shame, and has even revised the story, has a different recollection of what happened against all evidence. How can you forgive? Forgiving is hard. So for those of you who have people in their hearts they have not forgiven, that's okay. No, that's okay. The Lord understands. But if we want, but the question we have to ask ourselves is, okay, you can't forgive, you're not ready to forgive. Do you want to forgive? You know, I just want to share with you, in my own case, there were some people who were very difficult to forgive for me. And there was a time in my life when I still wasn't ready to want to forgive them. Even just to want to forgive them, I wasn't there. And it's okay. But it's important to be honest. No? Don't say, oh my God, please help me forgive. You don't want to forgive. If you don't want to forgive, then you ask God, God, please give me the desire to forgive so that one day, sometime later on, I'll be able to forgive. Honesty is important. Self-awareness is important. No? So if you're not ready to forgive, that's understandable. But do you want to forgive? If you don't want to forgive yet, pray for that. And God will give it to you eventually. If you don't pray for it, it will not come. Now, note what I've said. No? Forgiving is hard when the hurt is deep, when it hasn't stopped, and when there is no remorse. When did our Lord forgive his enemies? The hurt was deep, it hadn't stopped, and there was no remorse. So when we're able to forgive by God's grace, even when the hurt is deep, even when the hurting hasn't stopped, even when there is no remorse, that is when we're most Christ-like. That's when we're most Christ-like. You know the saying, to err is human, to forgive divine. But to be able to forgive when we're hurt deeply, the hurting hasn't stopped, and there's no remorse, that's the most Christ-like. It's not an easy thing to do. But this is what our Lord shows us. This is how he deals with evil. Forgiveness is possible only when we still see the original goodness of the person. And our Lord had that gift. Somehow, amidst all his pain, no, amidst all the sins committed around him at the crucifixion, he could still detect the original goodness of those criminals who were crucifying him and those people who were mocking him. No? There's a saying, right? Wolves in sheep's clothing. No? But actually, my own saying from my own experience is that we have to discover the sheep in wolves' clothing. Some wolves are just sheep pretending to be wolves, or forced to become wolves because of their trauma, because of their childhood, because of their frustration in life. They turn themselves into wolves. And the gift of our Lord is that he was able to recognize the sheep hiding in wolves' clothing. And this is something we can pray for. If there's one or two people in your lives you want to forgive, maybe you can ask God, Lord, help me to recognize the sheep that's hiding underneath all that wolf's clothing. Again, it's not easy. No? So 2 steps here to make it sound a bit simple or practical, although it's not. No? The first is we have to pray for the grace of desire to forgive, because many times we're not yet there. So if you're not yet there, it's okay, pray for it. But if you already want to forgive and still can't, pray for the grace to recognize the sheep hiding in the wolf's clothing. maybe you won't find it. Some people have layers upon layers of wolf's clothing, and maybe you'll never see it. No? But that can help you forgive. Okay. Uh, it's almost 11. I'm going to go over time. So those of you who'd like to leave, the recording will be made available. No? But I'm just going to go through. So forgiving is really about letting it go. And by letting it go, I'm not doing Frozen here. It's not the way the song means it, because when the song use let it go, it means to use your power, no? to be yourself, to be your true self, right? That's not what it means. Letting it go means letting go of the grudge. Stop holding that grudge. Stop holding that resentment. Stop holding that anger or hurt or hate even. No? Again, this is not something easy to let go of. No? But it might help to ask yourself, what will happen to you if you drop it? What will happen to you if you drop the grudge? What will happen to you if you drop the hurt? And maybe one day you'll say, actually, I'll feel better. Actually, it'll be a favor to myself. To be honest with you, this is what turned the tide for me. No? When I was having difficulty forgiving certain people, it took me many years. I kept praying, to recognize the sheep in the wolf's clothing. I couldn't find anything but wolves under every layer, because of my bias, right? Um, but and then one day it occurred to me, what would happen to me if I just dropped it? And I said, I'd feel better. And that's what did it for me. Um, Carrie Fisher has this advice for us. It's not original. She's not the original one, but she's the most famous one and she's wearing her Princess Leia costume here, so I wanted to use her. She said, resentment is like drinking poison, you drinking the poison, and waiting for your enemy to die. That's how stupid it is. So at least do it for yourself. Even if forgiveness is selfishly motivated, it's fine. Just get rid of that poison. Just don't drink that poison. Okay. So these are just some of my own thoughts about forgiveness. I know, there are a lot of slogans and cliches. In summary, I would say, number one, you have to gauge first. Do you already have the desire to forgive? Most of the time, you're not there yet. If you don't have the desire yet, pray for that grace. Pray to the Lord to help you want to forgive, and maybe it will come. Secondly, to help you forgive, look for the sheep hiding in the wolf's clothing. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe like me, you'll only find wolves upon wolves upon wolves, no? Because of your own bias or your hurt. No? But try. Third, do it for yourself. Spare yourself. Drop the anger. Drop the hatred. Drop the hurt. You will feel more liberated. So, our Lord, the third thing that our Lord does in dealing with evil is he takes the pain. He accepts the pain. He takes on the pain and accepts the pain freely out of love for the sake of love. And I think this is so important. When we deal with evil, when we fight with evil, we don't want the pain. Who does, right? We don't want to suffer. No? But sometimes when we fight evil, because evil is evil, it's going to hit you back. No? Maybe worse. Evil will hate you if you resist evil. Even if you try to do so non-violently, there will be suffering. There will be pain. This is what our Lord calls the cross. No? That's why he said, if you want to follow me, carry your cross. Because I'm fighting evil. If you're joining me in this battle, if you're going to be one of my warriors, this is the payment. You have to take the pain. But if you take the pain and accept it freely out of love for the sake of love, it becomes redemptive. No? Because our Lord doesn't just take the pain, he transforms the pain with his love. And this is the miraculous thing about Good Friday. It's not just about the pain. Our Lord, because of his love, transforms pain into something redemptive. Pain is not good. Nobody wants pain. God doesn't want us to suffer. But if we accept pain freely out of love, for the sake of love, it becomes a power. The way it's become a power because of the pain of our Lord Jesus on the cross. So suffering can be redemptive. Here's one example. An example is, let's say that through no fault of yours, you caught COVID, and then you have all the symptoms. The person who unfortunately infected you unknowingly is asymptomatic. But you, because of your condition or just malas, you ended up with all the bad symptoms. You lost your sense of smell, your sense of taste, you have fever, you can't breathe. Maybe you're saying, I didn't choose this pain, it just happened to me. But if you accept it freely and accept it with love and offer it to the Lord, it can be redemptive. That's the magic of our Lord's passion. Because he embraced pain, now suffering in the world, even meaningless suffering, can become redemptive if we wrap it with love, if we transform it with love. And I think this is the most amazing thing that our Lord did when he dealt with evil. Okay. So let's talk about the gardener again. So when you think about it, because of the story of our Lord, God is more than just a gardener who waters and nurses his plants. God has in Jesus also become the good seed that has been planted in our soil to fertilize it. So God did not just stay being a gardener. He also became a seed. He joined us in the garden. And he allowed himself to be vulnerable to all the elements that all of us are exposed to. The laws of nature, human will, evil spirits, structural sin, cultural sin, original sin. Look what happened to him. Look what happened to him. He paid the price. He suffered the consequences of evil. So original sin, we said, is the result of the sin of our first parents. It's a human environment that predisposed us to sin, that make us more vulnerable to evil spirits, and we compared it to a path in the woods. But just like any other paths in the woods, it can change. If we continue to follow the way of the world, we imitate the selfishness that it's promoting. We get back at people with violence. We don't think and allow evil to thrive. We are reproducing evil. We're reproducing original sin. But if we follow the path of Christ, we can transform that. So you can see that the path on the right is less used. If more and more of us use that, then there'll be transformation. And this is what the passion of the Lord is all about. He has shown us another way. And many people, millions of people in the last 2,000 years have followed him, but not enough. Most of the people today are still following the way of the world and reproducing the cycle of violence and evil that's been started in original sin. So we need to discern which path will we take. Every choice, every decision we make, every action we take is going to determine which path in the wood is going to be the bigger path, the primary path in the wood. Of course, our Lord's inviting us to follow the way of Christ. So I've said earlier that usually on Good Friday, we think of our Lord as a victim. But today, I hope you saw that Jesus is a warrior against evil. He doesn't look it because he looked meek and gentle. He looked passive, but he was doing all of that because he was fighting for us against evil. So if we want to sort of summarize, and again, this is my summary snapshot, my summary slide, if you want to take a screenshot of that. How does Jesus battle sin? First, he defies and resists evil in a way that doesn't augment evil, in a way that doesn't make him part of evil, a non-violent way, but effective way. We have to discern how that can be done. But at the same time, and this is very difficult, even more difficult, he forgives the evildoers. That's very hard, Very hard. Very hard to distinguish between the evil and the evildoers. But if we want to follow our Lord's way, we have to at least pray that we can forgive the evildoers, even if we can't yet. And the third that our Lord does is he takes the pain and he transforms it because of love. because it takes the pain out of love for the sake of love. When we willingly take on suffering because of love, we are transforming it. We're making it redemptive. We're participating in the Paschal mystery, as the theologians would say. So this, I think, would be a good summary, of how our Lord deals with evil. So the question to us is, can we try to do the same? Given my context in my life, my personal life, wherever I am, my professional life, my community, how am I being asked to defy and resist evil? What kind of evil am I being asked to defy and resist? Who am I being asked to forgive and when? Knowing that it's difficult to forgive when the hurt is deep, when it's still ongoing, and when there's no remorse. How do I take the pain and transform it? These are questions I think you can really sort of sink your teeth into as you go through the rest of the day. Again, we've been training our eyes on Jesus, looking at the way he did what he did, why he did it the way he did it. We try to imagine what he might have thought and felt so that we can know him more, fall in love with him more, and follow him more. We want to imitate him. We want to follow the way of Christ so we can help transform the world, even if many times it feels impossible to do that. So imagine Calvary. Our Lord will fight for us and will never give up on us. That's the reason why he stayed up on the cross. That's why he didn't give up. He was fighting for us. He was fighting evil. He wasn't just a passive victim. We should throw that image out of the window. Our Lord was fighting a battle. He was waging war against evil, and he was doing it out of love for us. And he is relentless, no? Even if he's battered and bruised. We can see it, no? In all the images of the cross. No? In this particular image, while carrying his cross with a crown of thorns on his head, no? He's weak, he's exhausted, no? And yet he's being jeered upon, he's being spat on, he's being mocked. He's battered and bruised, he's fallen 3 times, we're told, maybe more, but he's relentless. He keeps getting up. No? He wants to make it to Calvary. He wants to accomplish his mission. And he loves us till his last breath. It's an unconditional love. So I'd like to invite you to contemplate this mystery of our Lord on the cross, no? Marching on his way to Calvary and getting crucified on the cross, a warrior against evil, a warrior who takes the pain and transforms it with love so that his suffering becomes redemptive. I found another secular song, which I'd like to share with you. It's called Don't Give Up on Us, Don't Give Up on Me by Andy Grammer. It's a little upbeat, no? But I think it can gives us a fresh perspective on the mystery of the cross. So I'd like to invite you to contemplate on the image and to listen to the words and imagine that it is our Lord speaking to us, to you, no? And after the song, I'm going to ask you to join me in a moment of silence. And I'm going to invite you to type any prayer you may want to put in the chat box. I'd like to invite you now to share your prayer in the chat box if you'd like to. Let's give a few moments. We can also read the prayers of other people because I think it's important to pray for one another. No? Okay. So let me just wrap up while you continue to. So I think today the invitation is to channel our righteous anger against evil, whatever that means. No, to let the evil, but letting the evil means you can't eliminate the evil completely, but we must do our part in defying and resisting evil, and this requires discernment. No, how are we being called to defy and resist evil, and which evil? We are being called to forgive the evildoers and to take and transform the pain. We have to take and transform the pain. This is what Jesus did. No? So somebody was asking, give an example of transforming the pain. No? Because our Lord took the pain and did it with love, so many people have followed him. If he had just decided to take off and continue preaching without getting crucified, without taking the pain, if he had run away in the Garden of Gethsemane, um, the power of his sacrifice would not happen because there would be no sacrifice. No? So he didn't die bitter. He wasn't screaming bitterly when he died. No, he did it with love. And I think there are many examples of people, even today, in the midst of this pandemic, who are enduring their pain and suffering with love. No, people who are risking their lives, the frontliners, the medical workers, as well as the health workers, as well as people who support the health workers, no, people, the essential workers, right? So all of them are really, in a way, enduring their anxiety as they go to work, as they commute, no, and hopefully many of them are doing it not just to, for their livelihood, but out of love, no? For certainly out of love for their family that they need to support. So there are many ordinary examples of this, no? Many ordinary examples. So, so I'd like to invite you to say a short, silent, personal prayer. What would you like to tell our Lord? What would you like to ask from Him? As a kind of synthesizing activity, I will not ask you to type this on the chat box, no? So I will play a short instrumental piece, no? And then towards the end, I will post a prayer that you can make your own, no? But please spend the next minute or so just speaking to the Lord, given the different ideas that emerged during our discussion. Okay, so that brings to a close our day 2 retreat. We don't have time anymore for Q&A, but we did try to look at some of the questions in the chat box. So thank you again to everyone who volunteered to read and also participated actively and paid attention. Thank you very much. Let's keep one another in our prayers, and we will post the recording and the slides on the website. Just follow us on our Facebook page, and feel free to put your questions there or your conversations there. No? So thank you, everyone. God bless you. And I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. We will send you the link again tomorrow. Thank you very much.